I want to also just say something before we hand over to our next speaker, Dr. Megan Rose, and we'll introduce her shortly. I just wanted to add something about the Celtic Druid work. The reason I've been so interested in that, when I discovered the Druids were the historians of the people. So what I was talking about, a transpersonal history that's sensitive to spirit, right? Well, I discovered the Druids were the historians of the tribes of Ireland, of Wales, of Scotland, and Britannia, and Gaul. Now I've come to Gaul. And if it's true that Mary Magdalene was in the south of France, as Megan Watterson says, it was a sort of Druid forest she ends up in, then I think it's very interesting. And I think the Celts would have loved her and given her sanctuary. I think the Celts gave sanctuary to Joseph of Arimathea, legend says, in Glastonbury. And if I've gone into the timing of all this, the crucifixion probably happened around 33, 34, 35 AD, right? That's just enough time for some sort of refugees to get to Britannia, to get to Glastonbury. And then 10 years later, Claudius invades Britain with 4 crack legions. It seems to me that the Druids, who were peace lovers, non-violent people, and those early Christian mystics had a lot in common. And I'm just reporting that's one of the findings I've come up with. The Druids believed in reincarnation, and they believed in the eternal Dharma. The word Druid means Dharma seer, Druvid, a truth seer. So I just want to give that to you as a gift. If you're interested in going more into that, and I call myself a Christian Druid because I'm both, you know, they are complementary. I've written an encyclopedia of Druid studies, 1,000 pages. Nobody else has bothered because it's a hell of a big job. But I seem to love scholarship. I want to finish this section before we hand over to Megan. Today, the 22nd of July, is Mary Magdalene's Day. It was also the day of a massacre in the Cathar invasions of the south in Béziers. The army of the French establishment captured Béziers and they massacred 15,000 people in the town, women, children, men, on this day. And also 7,000 in the cathedral church, which was dedicated to Mary Magdalene. This is a scar on the sort of, you know, France's culture. I want to spend a minute in silent meditation, remembering the victims of Béziers before we go on. Is that okay? Just, you know, and maybe we can remember all the victims of other wars who've been, you know, killed for their faith. So thank you. So may we honor the fallen victims of wars of religion. May we refine the true gnosis that burns at the heart of peace, which is truly universal within all cultures, faiths, and peoples. Amen. Okay, so look, it's my great honor to welcome our next speaker, Dr. Megan Rose, who's going to talk to us about Mary Magdalene, Priestess of Sacred Sexuality. I think it's going to take us back to where Joanna started our talks, Dr. Joanna Kujawa. And Megan has a PhD in East-West psychology from the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, which was set up by a devotee or disciple, Haridas Charity of Aurobindo. I've been to Aurobindo's ashram in the south of India. It's a great place. Richard Tarnas and lots of other great scholars work there. So I'm glad you're from there. She's also a graduate of the Graduate Theological Union, which I presume is the one attached to Columbia University in New York. Okay, maybe a different.
GTU is in Berkeley, attached to UC Berkeley, to Cal.
Okay. But well, Berkeley is to die for beautiful. I've been there. She's also an initiated ceremonial magician and a Shakta Tantric practitioner. And she's a senior seer in the House of Bright Faery Seership Institute, which sounds incredible, and serves as an eco-spiritual minister and psycho-spiritual counselor, and is the executive director of the Entheosis Institute. Now that's all pretty awesome, and I'm sure, Megan, you will explain how you do all that and still get to sleep at nights. Brett, Mary Magdalene, Priestess of Sacred Sexuality. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you so much, Thomas and Annalisa both, for inviting me to be here today. So I'm going to share my screen here, because as they say, a picture is worth 1,000 words, although I'll probably have about 1,000 words to say as well. So I want to just invite us as a group to take a moment. You can close your eyes if you'd like, or just soft gaze. But take this moment to breathe deeply and to remember, put things back together. Smell the scent of roses. Taste the salt of ocean air. Feel the soft touch of the red veil. And hear the cooing of doves. She is calling you to her embrace. Open. Let us enter her mystery together. So we, you, me, all of us, the Mary Magdalene devotees of the 21st century, are midwives to an awakening intelligence. The embodied consciousness of the divine feminine in ourselves, regardless of our gender identity. And there's some noise on the line. If everybody could make sure that they're muted. Through us, she is weaving together a cohesive field and spreading her presence across the planet. This work was seeded, in some parts, by our foremothers through the rise of the feminist movement in the 60s and 70s, and on into the reclaiming of pagan identity and creation of goddess circles in the 80s, 90s, and beyond. At the close of the 20th century, we began to remember and reconstruct the lineage of Magdalene as she began to manifest on the planet through channels both academic and esoteric. This research was inspired by books like The Woman with the Alabaster Jar and Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and it offered scholars and devotees alike new interpretations of the relationship between Mary Magdalene and Jesus, in which they were much more than just a sinner and savior. In these stories, the love bond between the Magdalene and Jesus was celebrated, and their relationship as beloveds and consorts was deeply explored. And these alternative histories gave rise to fictional pieces, to our imagination, right? So stories like the Da Vinci Code, which brought their story to life and really took hold of the popular imagination and sparked kind of a wildfire of activation in people to whom these supposedly new information felt strangely familiar. Nowadays, there are so many Mary Magdalene books, devotionals, films, even an opera, which I had the pleasure of seeing in San Francisco, that one has to wonder if she hasn't been behind it all, reaching into the hearts and minds of folks who are ready to embrace a new gospel, one that celebrates Mary Magdalene as the divine feminine, the embodied Sophia, the Shekinah, the dark Madonna, she who is consort and equal to Jesus the Christ. In her name, many have taken up that red veil as a symbol of service to her reemergence and publicly honor the divinity of Mary Magdalene as a beloved and partner to Jesus. A Christed one in her own right, the Magdalene Materials casts a hermeneutics of suspicion on the traditional interpretation of the Gospels, and it points the way to a revised understanding of the nature and the identity of Christ. In doing so, we're offered a template for divine union and conscious relationship, as was modeled through her divine consort relationship with Jesus. She is an embodiment of the divine feminine made manifest in human form. A model for women, an initiator of men, a beloved of the outsider and other. She was a physical embodiment of the goddess, a manifestation of Shakti, of Isis, of Sophia. This talk then seeks to explore the personhood of Mary Magdalene through the lens of sacred sexuality. We'll explore how we can perhaps touch back into her example, and awaken her consciousness within, thereby giving us a deeper and more profound connection with our own sacred pleasure. We will also discuss how Mary Magdalene models embodied, empowered sexuality, and how she teaches us to awaken this within ourselves and our beloveds. I propose that the second coming of Christ is happening now, and it's emerging from inside of each of us. So, what is a Magdalene? I offer that Mary Magdalene, in addition to being a person, is also an honorific, a title. To become a Mary Magdalene is to acknowledge the root of the name, which is a sacred descriptive title. So in Hebrew, the name Mary means the beloved one, and the name Magdalene or Magdal Eder means tower of the flock. But what if we also interpret the meaning of this name through the tower image of the tarot deck, which, not coincidentally, I don't think, some say was actually created to keep the Magdalenian or the Grail tradition alive, just encoded for those with eyes to see. So the tower card traditionally symbolized powerful, sometimes world-altering transformation, change, even destruction. So what if being a tower of the flock indicates Mary Magdalene's powerful, activating, and transformational power? Following that thread, then, those who walk with her, who devote themselves to her path, become transformative change agents. To be a Mary Magdalene, then, is to step into an energetic embodiment, an archetype, and become a powerful agent of transformational change for yourself, your beloveds, your community, even perhaps the planet. To be a Mary Magdalene is to devote yourself to the alchemical practice of embodying your divine nature in service to this awakening Christos energy in all beings. Magdalenes practice the technologies that support people in becoming more fully aligned in their divine self, so that they may serve the planet through transformation of the self, of their relationships, and of the community. Magdalenes seek to ground their intuitive vision and reclaimed memories in ancient practices like alchemy, tantra, Kabbalah, etc., and have these practices that have guided humanity from the veiled and hidden path of sacred sexuality. So I want to talk a little bit about how I did this research, and just pause and say that so many of the pieces that we've shared here today are rooted in this sort of organic inquiry framework. And it's really yummy to watch my other fellow scholars really embrace the numinous intuitive ways of doing research. So the frame that I use, and one of the terminologies for that way of doing research, is organic inquiry. So for the purpose of this talk, And really, in order to do justice to the more esoteric nature of this very transformational subject matter, I used an organic inquiry methodology. So what is organic inquiry? Really briefly, because I think it really, since this is a scholarly audience and frame, I really think that understanding what organic inquiry is and how powerful it can be will really add to the academic discussion. So organic inquiry really includes a personal narrative, as well as invocation of the divine spirit or the intelligence of the research as a muse or a daimonic tutelary spirit. Research then becomes a ritual, becomes a spiritual inquiry into the divine intelligence guiding the process, which reveals the threads that the researcher weaves together as they follow the inner promptings of the spirit of the research. I find that most of what I know comes to me through intuitive means first, things like dreams, visions, and whispered guidance. The creators of organic inquiry, Clements, Edling, Jennett, and Shields, put it this way: the method of each organic study is a creative process, and therefore the researcher is called to pay attention to the suggestions of the inner voice of the research itself, which speaks by way of dreams, coincidences, or intuitive knowing to adjust the operation of the method accordingly. The method is never frozen, but it's constantly responding to the creative shouts and whispers of the primary wisdom, sort of spirit or daemon, of the research itself. The organic researcher who is revealing her or his or their own personal story is in a vulnerable and humble place, right? And we subdue the ego so that the unconscious world of dreams and non-rational influence can take its place in the evolution of the research. This chthonic underground realm is a rich source of inspiration that tends to elude a researcher who chooses to operate within the boundaries of strictly objective and rational methods, assuming control of the research. Right? It's our experience that topics of an intimate and sacred nature can best be explored with methods which are also allowed to operate beyond the confines of ego. So the goal of our organic inquiry then is for the seed of the research interest to blossom into a tree of transformation of perceptions, of self, of relations with each other, and of the world, of all concerned: the researcher, the participants, the folks who read and interact with the research. It's a very Magdalene methodological approach, in my opinion. Organic inquiry focuses on individual and personal transformation, which is persistent, pervasive, and profound. Research becomes a sacred dialogue between the researcher and the spirit of the inquiry. In this case, it was Mary Magdalene. So in undertaking an organic inquiry into Mary Magdalene as Priestess of Sacred Sexuality, I'm not trying to convince or coerce you into my way of experiencing her, right? We talked about that just briefly when we were chatting. What I am trying to do instead is I'm drawing upon the longstanding tradition of the Midrash, the rabbinical Jewish approach to a story or scripture that raises new insights and inquiries, and that you are then invited, these insights, these inquiries are then invited to stand alongside, not replace, former readings. And like the figure of Jesus or Yeshua, who, depending on which form of Christianity or post-Christianity even that you practice, has radically different ways in which he's understood and experienced, right? From Pentecostal fundamentalist Christianity to Catholicism to the Cathar that we talked about. I mean, such vast different interpretations of who Jesus was, right? So Mary Magdalene means many, many different things and has many different ways in which she's experienced. So for me, I've sat with Mary Magdalene for over 20 years now, through both scholarly and devotional relationship. I've studied her, I've prayed to her, I've even allowed her to sit inside of me in ritual. So this then is what she's taught me. Answering the Magdalenes Call. I began to be wooed by the Magdalene many years ago when I was in seminary. While at the Graduate Theological Union, I took a class on heresy. And just pause here and say that I love the word heresy. It's got such a bad rap, but the root, hierotikos, of heresy means one who's able to choose. So a heretic is somebody who's consciously choosing their beliefs. So in this class, we discussed the Cathars and their belief that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married and had children. And the idea really intrigued me. And it really made me wonder about who decides what becomes canon and why. Years later, I would read Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code and rediscover this story. But this time it not only intrigued me, but I felt like I was remembering something important, something I'd kind of known all along, but just kind of had forgotten. Of course, Jesus had a wife. I kind of already knew that, didn't I? Not long after I read Brown's work, I had the following dream. I'm in Paris. I meet a group of French artists and performers, and we are roaming the streets in a bohemian frenzy. All of a sudden, I hear this call, this irrepressible pull towards the south of France. I leap into the air and I begin to fly down to the south. I soar above rivers and mountains, and as I approach the south, I see in the distance a large sandstone cathedral, and it's pulling me towards it. I enter the cathedral and I find that the interior is dark wood and stone floor with red drapery, a really lush decor that I don't normally associate with churches. Two women approach me, both older, silver-haired and beautiful, and both are wearing red veils. And they tell me that they've been waiting for me. I feel overwhelming joy at seeing them, like I've known them from somewhere in time, but I'd forgotten them. They place a red veil on my head, and they whisper to me the secrets of their lineage, the Magdalenian line. And then they hold a large mirror in front of me and show me the truth of myself, the essence of my soul. I'm a Magdalene. When I awoke from this dream, I knew that I had to go to the south of France. But at the time, I hadn't done much research on the Cathars or on the tradition of the Magdalene in the south of France. So I began to devour every book I could read on the subject, really trying to piece together what I was receiving intuitively and uncovering somatically. I could feel the truth of the story. Every new piece I uncovered gave me chills. 2 years passed, though, and I still hadn't gone to France. And then in the summer of 2008, I had a very abrupt and startling dream. I was at the airport, and I had a ticket to France in my hand, but I had no money. I had no passport. I had no luggage with me. The plane was leaving, and I had to decide to throw caution to the wind and jump on the plane or go back home to get prepared, but miss the plane. So I awoke from the dream, and I knew that I had to go to France pronto. So that fall, I borrowed the money and I took a pilgrimage to the south of France. And my ultimate destination was to go to the grotto at Saint Baume, where the Magdalene allegedly spent the last 30 years of her life in seclusion after she fled Jerusalem with the other Marys. As many of you may know, the grotto is located in Saint-Maximin-de-la-Saint-Baume in the Provence region of France, about an hour east of Marseille as you head towards the Côte d'Azur. This is about 90 miles away from Sainte-Marie-de-la-Mer, the location that Annalisa shared with us about, where the Mary's boat landed and they came ashore with Saint Sarah, who became the patron saint of the Roma, the Gitan people. In Saint-Maximin-de-la-Saint-Baume is a basilica. You see the basilica on the right there, and that's the Basilica of Mary Magdalene, where her skull is venerated as a reliquary. It's taken out on her feast day every July and paraded around the town square. So you can imagine my shock and this sort of like preternatural thrill to find that just like in my dream, this basilica is this large sandstone building with dark wood interiors and stone floors. It was kind of gobsmacked. So we went into the crypt, I visited the reliquary, and I also made the arduous trek up the side of the mountain to the grotto, which is the picture on the left. Which holds another reliquary of the Magdalene, where the waters of the grotto are said to have healing powers. So in addition to the basilica and the cave, I also made the pilgrimage out to Sainte Marie de la Mer, to the church of the Saint Name, where the dark-skinned Saint Sarah is honored. In her subterranean crypt, the Black Sarah is worshipped by the Gitan, the Roma of that region, but as their patron mother. But Saint Sarah's identity is a mystery to outsiders. We're not exactly sure who she was or why she is so important to the Roma, who flock from all over the world each May, as Annalisa shared, to parade her statue down to the sea. Legend says she was a servant to the Marys, but why would a servant girl become a most revered saint? After I returned from my journey back home, I had a dream. And in my dream, I was observing a Roma wedding. Wedding of the Giton. And although I was not officially part of their group, I understood their language and I knew all of the songs. In fact, I kind of got the party started by singing for them a song that told of their forgotten heritage, sacred and hidden knowledge that no outsider was ever told. And this was the story of the scion of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, a daughter named Sarah, who was brought to the shores of France and who spent her life in hiding, threatened by the patriarchal forces who sought to deny the manhood of Jesus and destroy any evidence of his offspring. This daughter, Sarah, journeyed to India, where she lived and raised a family. Her offspring became the Roma people, who 1,000 years later would leave India in a mass exodus that would take them back to the European continent. In my dream, I explained to them that I had only one drop of Roma blood, but that was enough to awaken in me this precious guarded memory that perhaps even they'd forgotten. And I want to pause and say that I am not claiming to be of Roma descent. For reasons we'll unpack later, the significance of the one drop of blood isn't so much about my ancestry as it is an indication that we all have access to this hidden knowledge should we seek it. After this dream, I began to research the Roma. I began to piece together the idea that perhaps the famous secrecy of the Roma people and their stringent insistence on separation and bloodline hinges on the fact that they carry the seed, perhaps, of Jesus and Mary Magdalene in their cellular memory, in their DNA, giving rise to the gifts, the Roma's renowned gifts as seers and wonder workers. So I hypothesized that the volatility and danger of this mystical legacy that they carry is maybe what perhaps forced the Roma to wander, protecting themselves by never staying in one place too long, unable to feel safe in this world until the Magdalene, Sarah, and all other great dark goddesses are restored to their rightful place. So according to feminist author Barbara G. Walker, the Roma people are the last active worshipers of the goddess in Europe. They believe that the earth is our mother and so is woman. The secret of life comes from the ground. This sacred lineage is hinted at in the fervent devotion and pilgrim of the Roma to their matriarch, Sarah Kali, every May. So we're talking a lot about embodiment because to talk about sacred sexuality, we need to talk about the body, right? And going in pilgrimage and making these bodily pilgrimages to places and taking these practices into our bodies is sort of the root of all sacred sexual practice. So let's talk a little bit about Jesus' wife. So the literature on Mary Magdalene, clicked something weird on my computer. The literature on Mary Magdalene as Jesus' beloved disciple, consort, and rightful heir to his ministry, it seems to grow every year. It's kind of mushrooming at this point. The debate over who the Magdalene truly was she a harlot? Was she a disciple? Was she a wife? It rages on in both academic and esoteric circles, right? Everybody has a different opinion. Never has there been a figure of Christian history, in my opinion, so hotly debated and able to really fiercely polarize opinion. From New Testament scholars to feminist researchers, everyone seems to have a different opinion as to her personhood and role in the life of Jesus. The identity of this singular figure at one point created a frenzy within Christianity to protect the sacred story of Jesus as a sexless God. Yet conversely, she offers goddess worshippers a more satisfying Christ narrative, often wooing them into relationship with a much more human and relatable Jesus. One only need to look to church history to see that the efforts to suppress this story have a long-standing tradition. And it's really beyond the scope of this talk to explicate each and every permutation of belief, tradition, and heresy around the Magdalene. But I want to offer a few of the more cogent and better documented arguments for the Magdalene as the wife of Jesus, hidden in plain sight as the image of the Dark Madonna. So two prominent scholars of Magdalenian tradition, theologian and author Margaret Starbird and French Orthodox priest Jean-Yves Leloup, who's also known as Père Jean Seraphim, cite the venerable tradition of the Magdalene throughout history, the Grail myths, the Cathar heresies, the Merovingian legends, the Gnostic Gospels, etc., as well as the historical context of Jesus' life as evidence for this marriage. Leloup states, in the time of Jesus, a man who had not known, had sexual relationships with a woman was not considered whole and would neither enter the temple nor teach in synagogue. And I think known in this relationship is probably married. Starbird cites the Jewish tradition in Jesus' time wherein a father is required to ensure his son is married by the age of 20. So she remarks that Jesus not being married would have been mentioned in the evangelist's record, as it would have been an anomaly. She also notes that the Apostle Paul, when speaking of celibacy, exhorts his readers to model their behavior after his example, not after Jesus, presumably because Jesus wasn't celibate. The 2012 revelation of what's being called the Gospel of Jesus' Wife, which is a small Coptic fragment curated by Harvard Divinity School professor Karen L. King, has also offered further documentation to the collection of extra-canonical scripture and that supports the idea that Jesus was married. Lelou quotes the Gnostic Gospel of Philip as an explicit reference to Jesus' marriage to Mary. In it, it states, "There were three who always walked with the Lord, Mary his mother, the sister of his mother, and Miriam of Magdala, known as his companion, Koinonos. For him, Miriam is a sister, a mother, and a wife, Koinonos." So according to Lelou, Koinonos is in both Greek and Coptic, refers to the coupling and can be translated as fiance, companion, or spouse. So even if we limit ourselves to the canonical Gospels, right, and look at the story through the Gospel, in this case, the four Gospel accounts, the story of the woman with the alabaster jar, right, or Jesus' anointing at the hand of Mary Magdalene is one of only four stories that all four of the Gospel writers include in their version of Jesus' narrative. And the other three are Jesus' baptism, the miracle of the loaves and fishes, and the crucifixion. So clearly, this anointing is an act of integral importance. And if we interpret the act of anointing through the historical lens of what anointing symbolized in Jesus' day, it becomes a very erotically charged event. So anointing was traditionally understood as an act performed to make sacred the beloved one, to signify the Messiah King. And it was done in accordance with the Icean mysteries in preparation for the hydros gamos, the bridal chamber of the king and the queen. And therefore, Mary anointing Jesus was nothing less than her declaration of Jesus as priest king to her role as priestess queen. Finally, it's really critically important to acknowledge that the official story of Jesus's life was carefully crafted by the men that participated in the Council of Nicaea, and this was in 325 AD. There it was debated and decided which version of Jesus' story would be told based on the agenda of the council. Subsequently, the official version of the New Testament wasn't even canonized until 367 AD. So it's also around that time that the prominent role of women in the early church begins to be all but erased from church history. So the validation of Jesus' marriage appears to balance more upon these misogynistic agendas of the early church politics rather than actual historical evidence. For any story could be true or could have been true had the church fathers decided to ordain it as such and include it in the Gospels. So let's get esoteric for a minute and talk about Mary, veiled and unveiled. So this is going to dip us into Blavatsky, who I think, Thomas, you had just obliquely mentioned previously in your talk. So in 1877, Madame Helena Blavatsky, who's an occultist and founder of the Theosophical Society, published her first work, Isis Unveiled, The Secrets of the Ancient Wisdom Tradition, revealing to the world secrets previously only shared with those initiated into the Western esoteric mystery tradition. And the title of this work refers to the Hermetic concept of two Isis, the Isis of the heavens, who is the unveiled queen of heaven in all her wisdom, but far beyond the reach of humanity, and then the Isis of earth, who's veiled and knowable through initiation. So Blavatsky's goal was to lift this veil of mystery surrounding the Isis of earth, the secret doctrine, so that all who seek her will find illumination. Blavatsky's student was renowned philosopher and social reformer Rudolf Steiner, and he would apply this concept in a new way when he shared his two Jesus theory. He said there was Jesus the pure one and Jesus the king, who together became Jesus the Christ. Steiner said that Jesus was not born a Christed one, that he required initiation into the mysteries of Christ consciousness, and this was done through the preparation of two vessels that, coming together at the age of 12, created a strong enough container practitioner for the eventual descent of the Christos energy, and that upon his baptism, this Holy Spirit or divine Sophia Christ consciousness fully descended into the body of Jesus, making him the Christ. So if we read this drama through the lens of the great work, as ceremonial magicians call it, this alchemical transformation or apotheosis of the self, what some magicians call achievement of knowledge and conversation with the holy guardian angel, we find a precedent for how such an operation might be achieved. So to this frame, I would add that Isis Unveiled can also be understood as Mary, the mother, right, the Queen of Heaven, that same epithet, and that Isis Veiled can be understood as Mary, the lover, the beloved Magdalene. Isis Unveiled then sits in this formless void of space, or the cosmic womb, and this is Isis, Queen of Heaven, right? Also the title used for Mary the Mother. However, to contact this unveiled Isis, the Mother, you must first know Isis Veiled, the lover, who embodies the Earth Queen through her physicality. This is the role of the Magdalene, the beloved initiatrix. I suggest then that we can, that it can be through our embodied loving and the transformative power of that act that we can awaken Christed or expanded consciousness and step into knowledge and conversation with our own divine self. And this is very present in the Tantric traditions, deity yoga and such. So it is this Isis Mary's movement as the first mother, the creatrix of all that is, was, or will be, who then becomes the lover to humankind. And through this great rise, this Haros Gamos, manifests the Christos in humanity. So Steiner says, the Holy Spirit is feminine and closely linked with Sophia in the form of Mary. He says, quote, behold, she who was my dwelling place, and I was her son in the flesh and in the Godhead, even she who in the flesh looked like me, she is with you now. It is this Holy Spirit that overshadowed Mary and came down, even incarnated through her, who gives birth to the Son of God. She is the Spirit who transforms wisdom and reality, into love, into creation, into a world existing with the actual life of God. This life, in its own full transparency, is beauty, which is the self-revelation of the deity. End Steiner's quote. So let's talk about the two Marys, mother and lover. At the Third Ecumenical Council of Ephesus in 431 CE, it was decided that to give birth to Jesus was to be considered divine, thereby giving Mary the mother the title Theotokos, God-bearer. More recently, there have even been movements to give her the title of co-redeemer. According to Mark 10, 7-8, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. They are no longer two, but one. It follows then that if Jesus was married, his wife would be part of him and therefore elevated with him to the status of divinity. So Steiner says, at the heart of Christianity there are two beings, the being of Christ who entered our world and turned creation inside out, and the being of Mary, for Christ could enter this world only through the being of Jesus and Mary. The presence of Christ who entered our world through Jesus and Mary means for Christians that human nature and divine nature, God and cosmos, are no longer two, but one. So Steiner is referring to Jesus and Mary, the mother. But I want to offer that what if this was true of both Marys, the mother Mary, and Magdalene, the lover Mary? If we hold the possibility that Jesus was in fact married, then his wife, through the power of their sexual union and in intertwined essences, would partake in the God-making as well. Through the sexual alchemy of divine union, both Jesus and Mary Magdalene became co-redeemers in the elevation of humanity from its state of forgetfulness, and together opened that veil for all of humanity to partake in Christed being. I offer that there are two Marys of great significance in the Gospels, Mary the beloved mother and Mary Magdalene, the beloved spouse, both of which were crucial to the work of Jesus' apotheosis, thereby achieving their own apotheosis. So Mary the mother is the Queen of Heaven, and she is the principle of theogony, the birthing of God.
soccer or dance in soccer or
Sorry, I'm getting, yeah, thank you. Mary is the mother, the queen of heaven, and she is the principle of theogony, the birthing of God. Mary, the lover, the beloved Magdalene, is the principle of theophany, the revealing of God. So this idea of the fecundation of Mary, which has traditionally referred to the virgin birth, I would offer that it also refers to an unending cycle of birth, transformation, rebirth. Within this cycle, I place the impregnation of the Magdalene with the Christos consciousness via the vehicle of the prepared one, Jesus and Mary, which is performed through their hieros gamos, or their mystical union of heaven and earth. This transformed both Mary the woman and Jesus the man into the Christos Christa. Together, they birthed the Christ consciousness, anima and animus united, a working in which they were both required for achievement of the great work. Jesus' work was primarily demonstrated outwardly through his teachings, his miracles, and the ultimate sacrifice, his crucifixion, whereas Mary's work was perhaps achieved more inwardly as a consort and a womb space for this activated Christed DNA, which would then be seeded throughout the planet through their children. Together, they created a divine incarnation, the potential for their offspring, more on that in a moment, to achieve Christ consciousness without the need for esoteric initiation. The tradition of initiation is also typically understood through the dying king, risen God metaphor, right? That's what we see through many, many different initiation stories worldwide. I suggest that perhaps this is a more male model of initiation, and that in the work of the two Marys, the mother and lover, we see perhaps a female model for initiation centered within the womb. So like an unending Ouroboros, it is a mother-lover mystery, the hidden lineage of the dark Madonna. I believe that line in the Gospel of Philip, she was his sister, his mother, his wife, may also allude to this knowledge. In fact, we see this very clearly in the story of Isis, where Isis, the sister wife of Osiris, the dying king, gives birth to Horus, the risen god, who then becomes her son-lover. So Osiris Horus is transformed from one being into another, whereas Isis actually is the womb constant, the alchemical cauldron that precipitates and initiates this transformation, or the chalice. Steiner also goes on to say that Mary is the great mystery of the Christian tradition. Nothing would have happened without her assent to God's desire. Yet the Gospels mention her rarely. It's as if she lived in effacement. She is a secret revelation. Certainly, whenever she appears, her presence is fraught with consequence. She's intimately linked to Jesus as mother, friend, and disciple. She participated in his ministry and his miracles. She stood at the foot of the cross where Christ gave her to be the mother of all. She was indispensable to the descent of the Holy Spirit at Pentecost. It is difficult not to conclude that she is close to the inner core of Christ's mission, as well as his teaching and ministry. She was recognized from the beginning to be the new Eve, as Christ was the new Adam. So I offer that Mary's scarce appearance in the Gospels is because the twofold Mary was eradicated by the Council of Nicaea. Prior to this, I think it was understood that the Christos descended first through the mother to give physical birth to Jesus, and then through the beloved transformer, the Magdalene, to co-facilitate spiritual birth to the Christ. And this is the hidden secret of the Gospels, the sacred transformational magic of the God-making death and resurrection, the mystery of Isis, Osiris, Horus. This hidden knowledge, which Steiner calls Grail knowledge, began to flow into humanity in a new way through the Jesus-Magdalene union. Whereas deity yoga or tantric weave is well established, albeit rarefied in the in the East, I offer that the Jesus-Magdalene union brought this spiritual technology through in a new way to the West. Let me say that again. So whereas deity yoga, right, or the tantric weave that we understand that brings both participants into this sort of divine rarefied essence of themselves, is a fairly well-established practice in the East. What I think is that Jesus and Mary's union, the Magdalene union, brought this spiritual technology in a new way to the West. And as a result of this influx, Steiner says that we will gradually develop a new conscious clairvoyance that in practice implies the transformation of wisdom, or Isis Mary Sophia, into love, which is Mary Magdalene. Let's talk a little bit about the Christed couple. We're going to get into Tantra here for a sec. So in Tantra, there's a concept that through repeated sexual union, we take on the karma of our partner. This is echoed in the previously quoted passage from Mark, where the two become one, right? It follows that the mystery of the womb is perhaps a mystery of transfiguration of the beloved through sex. In the tantric practice of deity yoga, one looks for the divine potential that slumbers within a partner and woos this deity to the surface through visualization, practice, and deity worship. I believe that although they were not perhaps officially practicing tantra, although some have made the argument for Jesus' initiation into Eastern traditions, this concept is embedded in the sacred sexual practices that Jesus and Mary Magdalene were likely cultivating in their union, which is hinted at throughout Jesus' teaching, and particularly in his instruction of the Lord's Prayer. Together, they participated in the great work of awakening and transforming their consciousness through the practice of making their marriage a holy and divine co-creation, a divine union designed to transform both of them into Christed beings. I offer that this is what the Magdal Eder, the tower, truly represents, an alchemical lightning bolt of transformation cauldroned in the womb container of sacred sexual consciousness that initiates the couple into the divine. This is perhaps the legacy of being a Mary Magdalene, devotion to the great work of embodied divinity. And in spite of 2,000 years of sublimation, it is this influx of knowledge that now awakens our memories and hastens our remembering of the transformational power of co-creation. So the new Mary Magdalene, given that religious beliefs are based on stories that have been created and shared and eventually canonized, I find it compelling to consider the current stories that are being told about Mary Magdalene. And whether these stories are historically accurate or not seems to matter less and less when we look at them through the understanding that all history is a version of a story someone once told. In fact, the accuracy of a person's life, let alone the events that took place in their lifetime, can take on radically different meanings and lead to a variety of interpretations depending on the person telling the story. The adage, histories written by the victors, could just as accurately be stated as histories written by the literate, the powerful, the educated, the wealthy, etc., etc. Therefore, finding the truth about the life of a historical figure is kind of tricky business. For even when that person has left his or her diary or their diary, what they didn't tell us about their life is sometimes more important than what they did tell us. So the creation of a myth or a legend almost always begins by oral tradition, a compelling story that's told and retold through the generations to inspire, instruct, or illustrate. And that story is a living thing. With each new telling, it takes on nuances, inflections, emphasis given by the storyteller. However, the listener is also key, right? The listener filters the story through his or her own experience, focusing on the parts of the story that are relevant to them. Therefore, there's no one right, true, or only interpretation of a story. And as we mentioned before, Jewish Talmudic scholars seem to really understand this. As you know, the practice of Midrash accepts that the scriptures do not have only one interpretation, and arguing for your interpretation or ideas is a lively encouraged tradition. So the emerging body of fiction and channel materials about Mary Magdalene constitutes a growing body of extraordinary literature advocating for an reinterpretation of traditional Christian beliefs. We have very little in the way of source material about who Magdalene actually was and what she actually did, but we do have a few stories that have made their way down to us through both oral and written tradition. And these stories are compelling enough to spark the imagination of a generation of folks who seek to put flesh and blood back on the reliquaries of bone venerated as Magdalene. Books like the Da Vinci Code are powerful and important, not because they're able to be historically authenticated, but because they touch into a deeper undercurrent within the collective Christian and post-Christian consciousness, a stream that whispers of what it would have been like to live in a Western world where women were not only equal, but embodied, holy, and powerful. This is the example that the Magdalene gives. The woman who could stand along the Messiah, the Christ, fully love and worship his body, bear his children, inherit his ministry, and be worthy of his devotion in return. So the new Mary Magdalene is simultaneously represented as an initiated priestess of Isis, a practitioner of sacred sexuality, an initiate into the Kabbalistic Essene mysteries, and ultimately a voice for the dark goddess and the divine feminine. She is hidden in plain sight in the fairy tale princess become queen, the sleeping beauty waiting for the curse of forgetfulness to lift, or the cinder girl hidden in the dustbin of history waiting to be rediscovered so that she can once again be reunited with her beloved. While each story told about the Magdalene has its own unique and sometimes conflicting narrative, they also contribute to a growing body of knowledge about the work of the Christa, the divine Sophia, as she touches the hearts of her devotees, inspiring them to put pen to paper. And the goal is not to find one cohesive story about who the Magdalene is or what she specifically did, but instead to allow her stories to weave a non-linear, multifaceted reality, speaking to each listener's heart through revelation. Just as the gospel writers told the story of Jesus with slightly different narratives, some including completely contradictory accounts, so we can allow the figure of the Magdalene to have multiple realities, knowing that the facts of her actual life story are secondary to the meaning we derive from her, how she influences our beliefs and practice as devotees of the goddess. Whether her final resting place was a cave in France or at the foot of the Tor in Glastonbury or back in Israel does not lessen the powerful and numinous experiences pilgrims have at her various resting spots. Whether Jesus and Mary had one child or three matters little, for if you choose to believe they had children at all, then we all become their children. In fact, science writer Steve Olson states, if Jesus had children, and if those children had children so that Jesus' lineage survived, then Jesus is today the ancestor of almost everyone living on earth. If our articles of faith include belief in a child born to Jesus and Mary Magdalene, then it's not a question of if we hold the DNA of their DNA, but more so, what do we do with this knowledge? As inheritors of a post-Christian, goddess-awakened feminist spirituality, I believe it's our job to transform our world through the reshaping and reframing of our religious stories and myths to make them more inclusive and empowering. Let us then step into our power as co-creators of our collective story by resurrecting and reclaiming the God as a Christ. So I realize I'm at time. I have a slide here that I would love to share, and then just a closing devocation. I missed a slide. So I have a couple of practices for us to take on to help cultivate an embodied relationship with the divine. And if you'd like, you can email me and I'll send you these slides so that you can sort of look again at what these practices are. But these are practices that you can do alone or with a partner, and they help to serve us awaken the divine, in this case, Mary Magdalene within us. So first of all, and I'm sure many of us probably have this already, as a daily devotional practice, creating an altar with an image, incense, candle, those sorts of things that you can set it daily and invite relationship with her. Perhaps recite hymns, liturgies, poems, songs, and make offerings of food, incense. Those are traditionally used to feed the deity. The second is, one of the things that Mary Magdalene is most known for is anointing. So I encourage you to take on a regular self-anointing practice. Take an anointing oil, perhaps a rose fragrance, and anoint your body in dedication to her. Pay extra attention to your erogenous zones, as these are the doorways to sacred sexual awakening, and maybe make it a daily practice. Get out of your shower and bath and massage oil into your body as this anointing and connection to her in your body. And then finally, when you are making love to yourself or to someone else, imagine that she is there co-experiencing this act along with you, perhaps even as you, and send a little of that energy to your altar as a gift to her. So in closing, I'm going to stop my share. And I'll just read the devocation. You can close your eyes if you want. Take a moment, breathe deeply again, and imagine. Imagine a world where Christianity was the story of how two people joining together in sacred union can co-create the Christos, the awakened divine human consciousness. Imagine what the last 2,000 years might have looked like had that been the dominant narrative. And now bring that forward to today, to this moment here and now, and see this story now becoming an established belief, spreading from heart to heart, creating a new trajectory for humanity, the true second coming of the Christ, her consciousness now resurrected and reinstated in her rightful place, sovereign unto herself, Magdalene. So be it, and so it is.
Gosh, Megan, that was epic. Thank you so much for your beautiful invocation of the direction where we have to go. I always think philosophers are like intelligence agents of the god or the gods, and a general among intelligence agents has to be responsible for the whole picture. And you've just given a talk as a general among the intelligence agents of the gods.
Rallying the troops.
Yeah, we're all with you on that. Thank you so much. I think we won't do questions directly. Put them into chat to Megan.
Yeah, I'll respond in chat.
And she can write back and you can email each other and stuff. Because I want to move on to our next general of cosmic intelligence, which is Gretchen Cornwall, who has joining us from England, although she's American originally. And one thing I just want to mention is strange synchronicity, Gretchen. I noticed on your sort of CV that you're connected with the Shell Grotto at Margate.
Yes, I'm one of the trustees of the friend group that helps raise money for the fragile structure.
Yeah. So I was reading, just to introduce you, I want to say a synchronicity. I was reading a biography of Blavatsky by a woman called Jean Overton Fuller, who was a British intelligence operative. And she reckons, I don't know if you know this, Gretchen, that the young Blavatsky met her teacher, Moria, in Margate. And she gives the evidence, she gives the dates. Moria was with the Nepali delegation coming to London for the Great Exhibition of 1851. And
Okay.
I wondered, if you've come across that. Is that common knowledge in Margate?
It is, it's not common knowledge. I really appreciate that. There was discussion that they thought she'd been in Ramsgate, which is just down the road, down the coast. And I had always thought that she should have then been there. But the grotto was supposedly discovered in 1837, but her stay in Ramsgate was put down as 1824. But I had heard the 1851, so thank you. I had not looked into that.
No, I'll send you some stuff. Anyway, we're here to discuss. Gretchen is going to explain to us how the Knights Templars fit into all this. Gretchen is a one-woman universe of exploration into Templar artifacts, archaeology, mysteries, and what was their view on the Magdalene. Lots of rumors abound, but very few facts. So Gretchen, we're really looking forward to your talk. And you've been all over, even North America, you found traces of the Templars, I believe. So I'm really looking forward to what you have to share with us.
That certainly might be another topic. That's a very involved one. I'm no longer working on that particular project, but it was so far inland along the St. Lawrence River, I believe that I could probably find evidence of other relay stations. It was all based on the fur trade, which was a top secret financial endeavor that the French crown participated in, and hence the eventual wars between France and England over that land. But when you invited me here this evening, I had a nebulous idea of what I wanted to talk about. One of the things that I am most proud of is that I believe that I, by the same grace that Dr. Megan has brought up, by other participants have brought up, I seem to stumble across evidence on accident, if you will. And I seem to be quite good at it. when I'm least looking for it at all. But I would like to keep this female centric, and what I like to look for, if I can, is evidence of the Knights Templar post 1307, 1312. But in this case, I would like to talk about medieval veneration of Mary Magdalene as a constellation. And I've found evidence of this that goes all the way up through into the early 17th century. But I'll only share one with you tonight. So if I might, if that's okay, I mean, I can talk about anything, but I think that you might appreciate this. May I have the screen, please?
Sure.
Thank you. Let me know if you can see. What do I do? What is the best thing to do? Forgive me.
You can share your screen now.
I can share screen. Ooh, that's how that works. Okay, can you see that? Yes, you can. This is a little bit of American shameless promotion here. I do like to travel as much as I can. It is not financially always possible, but if I can go somewhere, I sure will. And then happy synchronicities happen. And I've been blessed to have an appearance on the Curse of Oak Island for my Templar information. What I want to discuss, however, tonight is the Hortus Delicarium. Now, I do not read Latin. I've had some help with this, and I may not pronounce any of this correctly, but I am looking forward to putting it before you. This is a study on this illumination right here. It's a beautiful big tome, if you ever have a chance to look through one. It's impressive. This is out of my first book, and it's a chapter called The Stars of the Magdalene. Excuse me, I'm very adrenalized right now. And I wanted to talk about, in part, did this illumination have any kind of influence on the Rosicrucians, the Freemason movement? Is this a medieval prototype of a tracing board? That is a question. The lady responsible for this, Abbess Herod of Landsberg, I would like to talk briefly about who she was, in as much as is available for a medieval individual, especially a woman. It's not easy to find information about medieval feminine leadership. So let's go take a look at her home turf. This is the ruined castle of her birth, Chateau de Landsberg, and it is in Alsace territory, which is German, but with strong French influences. So she was really at the crossroads of both of those cultures. And the drawing is from the 17th century. And here is an interior view, or that the castle wall looking inside the interior view. I love photographs. I think that photographs of places so that we can so we can place someone in context is really helpful to our understanding of who they were versus a two-dimensional drawing. She was born 1130, July 25th, 1195, she passes. Close to the Magdalene Day of Veneration. What I find interesting about her is she joined the Abbey of Mont Saint Odile, and it is a Merovingian abbey. And she entered there as a child and received a very high education and eventually becomes the abbess. Just as a sidestep, I would like to mention that this abbey is within miles of Magdeburg, the city of Magdeburg. And you can extrapolate by the name who they might be referring to. The drawing is their heraldry crest for the city. And she's holding the palm frond in her hand of victory. evoking the day when Christ comes into Jerusalem, and she's holding the sword of truth. And I always believe that proximity is everything. Family relationships are everything. Like any detective show, who was there, who had the motivation, who had the means. So Harad comes from a wealthy family, as we have seen by this ruined castle, her father being a very important nobleman, and she is within striking distance of Magdeburg. And Germany has a special relationship with Mary Magdalene, and I hope to learn more about that in time to come. But Bernard de Clairvaux gave his crozier to Speyer Cathedral, and I thought that was rather interesting. He traveled there on a few occasions, but you can go to the cathedral and see his crozier. Back to the Garden of Delights, I believe is what this translates out to. She was the main mover and shaker behind this body of work, an encyclopedia of the day, which in itself was actually rare, especially since a woman has penned it. It contained science, theology, Socratic and Platonic philosophy, historical commentary, written for her nuns and for the future of the abbey, a manual of how to be a intelligent, worldly wise, and productive nun of the abbey, but better leader of the abbey for the sustaining future. She oversaw everything. She was definitely in control of this project. The illustrators, the scriptorium, compiling and editing the work herself, writing some of the work. So it is, for centuries, what's so sad about this, I always just feel so sad when I read or hear of the loss of great artwork, books, sculptures, anything. It just, you know, is so sad. But the encyclopedia remained with the monastery for centuries, and eventually was moved to the Library of Strasbourg because they thought it would be safer there. But no, there was a siege of the city, and it perished. The work perished. And the reason why we have the drawings we have today is because they were copied earlier in the century, and that saved this for us for today. Much of it is gone. They have survived a great deal based on the drawings that were copied. So keep in mind, this is not original. These are copies. So what I'd like you to consider is perhaps the person copying didn't know exactly what he was looking at, but he might have. He might have been putting his own consciousness into his illustration work, perhaps slightly skewing things a little bit, so as perhaps we're not seeing the exact references that the abbess would have liked us to have seen. And this is the famous frontispiece, and it is very complicated. Again, I do not read Latin. I have had help from a few sources. So I hope someday to get a complete, solid translation of this. But what is not available to us in the written, there certainly is available to us in the 7 Muses. So have a good quick look at that. We'll be reviewing each in different sections. Philosophia and the 7 liberal arts. And of course, the keystone of the Greek civilization. And these images and concepts and ideas have come down the centuries through Freemasonry and into our education system today. With great pride, it has been transmitted down to us. I feel like I'm going through this too very quickly, but okay, here we go. The outer ring translates roughly, the wise men of the nations, the philosophers of the world, and the clergy that had gone before. These exercises noted that the search for philosophy through the investigation and confirmed in writing are suggested for the students. 7 teaches skills through studies of philosophy and explores these elements and hidden things. So she's talking about, directly about, observing the natural world of studying the past and taking that into the future with educated intelligence, but also of unlocking hidden mysteries. That is what I took away from that outer ring. Directly, Lady Philosophia, I would like to talk about her for a few moments. And of course, the phrase, the Sophia of Christ, sometimes in Christianity is literally strictly male, the wisdom of Christ, in the same way that the planet Venus, the morning star and the evening star, rather than being feminine in nature or of divine union, female and male, has become strictly male in modern terms. But what if Sophia, in this particular example, literally is Mary Magdalene? So that is what I'm hoping to share with you in the course of this. So her crown, the 3 faces on her crown are ethics, logic, and physics. My thought on this, the first thing that hit me, are these 3 faces potentially children? Is that possible? All of these studies are an onion, and that's not a cliche, but it is a cliche. You dig down deeper and you keep pulling and revealing the onion below the layer. Okay, I spent a lot of time with this, and I just thought her banner looked odd to me. It's exaggerated. It's soft geometry, if you will, but it's been translated as all wisdom comes from God. Only the wise can achieve what they desire. So this is interesting. So you have 2 separate comments here. You have everything comes from the all that is, from the divine, the great divine, God, however you choose to view your creator. However, the second phrase says only the wise can achieve what they desire. In other words, expressing will, the desire to achieve, which is not a heresy. However, we have been led to feel that that is intrinsically wrong, to want to aspire for greater inner wisdom or outwardly in the world. So I think this whole text, in my view, I think is bordering on heresy, which is rather interesting. Arithmetic, she's interesting. If you look, oh, I'm jumping ahead of myself here, excuse me. The differences, the strange inscription here is the differences between the numbers of a monster. I think this is complicated. Again, we're back to the onion. This is a very strange phrase, and I do think that it has multiple meanings. I just wanted to share with you the little face off to the side here. I think he's rather interesting. Perhaps he's an elemental, perhaps he's just a bit of fun. But the medieval mind enjoyed imbuing their cathedrals and churches and guild halls with these unusual faces that were meant to startle people and perhaps shift them into a different frame of thought. And they were also meant to frighten away negative evil beings. So what you want to do, if you're going into battle against an enemy, you don't want Mr. Bean, you want James Bond. So you're going to put something scary on your precious structure. So that's the intention behind these strange faces, gargoyles, etc. So that goes right back to the thought, what is being said here. So we're talking about the numbers of a monster, and we're within a protective circle here. That's one concept that I had considered. I think I'm going to burn through this pretty quickly. The differences between the numbers of a monster. Are we talking about an allusion to the Virgin of the Apocalypse? And I do think that Dr. Megan was correct, and the other speakers today have hinted at, outright said, that Mary Magdalene is the beloved and stepping forward as the primary female personage and is the new Eve, but eclipsing the Virgin Mary as the bride of Christ, becoming part of that divine union, that balance that our world so strongly needs today. So I'm mushing some thoughts together here, but the woman clothed with the sun, standing upon the moon, the stars in her hair, about ready to give birth. So are we talking about a woman who's literally pregnant, who is fleeing, who is about to give birth, perhaps in Marseille? Perhaps she's already had Sarah. And Sarah in Hebrew literally means princess. That is actually a title. It's not an actual name as we would know it today. It's a title. So the Saint Sarah becomes the heir of Yeshua and the Magdalenes' world. And it's up to her to pass that knowledge down. And I do appreciate what Dr. Megan said. I had spoken with a mathematician years ago who said that if the union only had one child, we'd be looking at least exponentially 35 million people today. But I think it's more correct to say that we are all that child. And I have, through my book that I flashed the first slide, as far as I'm concerned, the Holy Trinity is actually father, mother, child, whether it be male or female. And that is inclusive of all of humanity. It becomes our journey then. But it can only be our journey with her in her rightful place, not as a hidden figure of the Holy Spirit. She should not be entirely veiled to us. Now, see, I think I might be jumping ahead. I'd like you to consider the date is July 22nd, the feast day of Mary Magdalene, and arithmetic is holding in her hands a string of beads for counting. And I believe they numbered 22, which I think is interesting. And that's important as we continue here. Okay, geometry. I've had to swivel the illustration around so that we could see this a little bit easier. Geometry, I direct the measurement of the earth through many cares. That's interesting. Through many cares is this illustration talking about the Magdalene fleeing to Marseille, as we all have different concepts on where the family went to. But she's so prominent in France. That's where I've planted my flag pole. The British Isles appreciate and have a feeling for this family having been in the British Isles as well. In fact, all the way up to Scotland, believe it or not. Geometry is very important here through many cares, travails, travel, forced exile. Take a look at the compass and the staff and the fold of her skirt. Normally, we don't see too many medieval figures of women holding these instruments. We're all familiar with the illustration of God measuring the earth. He looks like the sun, Jesus bending over with the compass, measuring the earth. So here we have a feminine figure who is basically doing the same thing. So this is what you can achieve when you follow the lines of the compass, the staff, and her skirt. Do you see the intersection here? If you follow the line of her skirt all the way down, in geometry, you know, this is a perfect fit. So I'm sure that everyone here is well versed in sacred geometry, and of course the cathedrals of Western Europe in particular that have a strong Templar hand all have geometry that were infused into the buildings to draw up our feelings of upward physical upward attention, higher thoughts, higher spirituality. Their cathedrals just draw you straight upward. And the rose windows that Templars often funded also were drawn with these instruments. And here they're all standing in their own archway, supported by pillars. I'll go on here. I wanted to talk about astronomia as well. And I thought that was curious. Astronomia is learned by means of which the name of an omen is pulled from the stars. So we're talking about at the time, the medieval world, astrology and astronomy were wedded together. It wasn't up until the Age of Reason in the early 1700s that astrology was moved out of the discussion. The same with chemistry. Alchemy, of course, chemistry is from the word alchemy from the Far East, the Islamic scholars, and it's chemistry, not alchemy anymore. So at the time, and you can see this play out in the cathedrals across Europe. Canterbury Cathedral, which I'm not too far from, has references to astrology in it. So they're talking about predicting, they're talking about anticipating, and what will they do with that information? So it's interesting that these women are being taught astronomy, how to build a cathedral, basically, and also the more subtle arts of astrology, and of course the sensitive aspect of chemistry, alchemy, the inner practice. So notice what she's holding. She's holding a jar, if you will. So what I would like to ask, what astronomer holds a vessel when they're observing the night sky. So I just think that's quite interesting. I'll leave you with that for a moment. I'm going to run out of slides really quickly. That's okay. So this is my take on what she is expressing. I believe that we're looking at another hidden clue in this illustration, and that we're looking at Mary Magdalene in code. If you see that strange blue line here that I've inserted, this is actually this is Cassiopeia. It's pretty exact as I could make it. It's a ping, which means it has a translucent background, and I pulled it down from online. But you can source this yourself if you'd like to. And I know that this isn't a dead-on match, but as I said, this isn't the original illustration. This is one that was done in the early 1800s before the fire destroyed it in 1870. So if this looks a little strange to you, I think it's because things went a bit wobbly. That's just my take on it. I'd love to see the original, but that's not possible without a time machine. Okay, so Cassiopeia, the throne of heaven. And in the night sky, Cassiopeia revolves around the North Star, which would be Yeshua, Christ. So veneration of Mary Magdalene in the stars as Cassiopeia. Cassiopeia is often viewed with a mirror, and it is meant to represent vanity, but I would put this to you. The Platonic mystery school, above its archways, know thyself is the motto for the mystery school. So the mirror is the best way to know thyself. It's a metaphor. So, you know, Cassiopeia is looking in the mirror, but suddenly the mirror takes on a whole new meaning. And it is a code, because you're safe if, oh yeah, that's just Cassiopeia, she's looking at herself in the mirror again. Phew, got out of that one, right? The Inquisition's not going to get me today because I have a good cover story. This is the first reference that I found to the veneration of Mary Magdalene as Cassiopeia. The second one is in my book and is early 17th century. So here you have the revolving throne of heaven, the Queen of Heaven. You have astronomy standing next to geometry. You've got the M and the W. As the throne revolves in the night sky, depending on where you're standing, it is an M and a W. So that is intriguing. And those two figures are right next to each other. I don't think I remembered to put the illustration in here, but I took I thought I would go ahead and take the banner. Let's see, that's slide 19. I took the banner and I duplicated it, put it upside down and put the two together, and you basically ended up with a really interesting series of basically, you know, the Star of David multiplied. That illustration is in my book as well. Let's see, we were on 19. Oh yeah, the little face again. There are a couple little faces. So what I think is interesting about this is you've got these little gargoyle-ish figures here in the pillars that are assisting in distracting, protecting. You're going to look at that and go, oh, well, that's a little bit silly, isn't it? It's slightly uncomfortable to look at. So you're not going to really concentrate on the deeper wisdom here, the deeper knowledge. And what I like about this illustration is that each of the 7 muses has their own archway, doorway, and 2 pillars. If you look at them each separately. And doorways, of course, is a metaphor for initiatic experiences or of an experience of knowledge that you are being shown. And this is what I have taken out of this. The Sophia of Christ, an unusual figure. Why depict Sophia in the medieval world in a female abbey as a woman? Is this traditional? Yes, if you're talking about ancient Greece, if you're talking about Freemasonry. However, in Christianity in the medieval world, this might be considered out of place. I'm willing to be wrong here, but I think this could be a little bit out of place. But this is in a abbey. This book was never really meant for the public to see. It's only meant for the women who were being guided to take over as the leadership. So there would have had to have been a few women that would have been gifted the knowledge of being able to understand this volume. So in this volume, in this frontispiece, instead of a male God being in the creator position, or Jesus being in the creator position, you have Sophia as she would have been portrayed in ancient Greece. So I think that that is interesting. And of course you could say, well, that's a nod to the Virgin Mary, and not to take anything away from the Virgin Mary, not at all. I completely appreciated Dr. Megan's commentary on the Virgin being the gateway for Yeshua, and then of course the bride steps in as the lover, perpetuating the generation of DNA and also knowledge. I do not think in this case that this is the Virgin. I think we're looking at Mary Magdalene. And that this is an allegory of creation, of feminine creation. So I've taken the circle out of the rest of it to declutter it a bit. And, you know, if you look at her, yes, she's two-dimensional, but she does come across with a grace, she's looking at you straight out of the page with knowledge. She looks kind. She also looks sensual. If you see, you know, the very point of the banner where her lower hand is, the point is pointing right down to her womb. And the red cloak parts, so her womb is revealed. And I have been a dressmaker, a wedding dress designer of historically themed dresses for brides. And I can tell you that this cloak is in an awkward position. This is not a natural fall of fabric here. She's essentially wearing a cape, but capes are long. Do you see this here, down here by her leg? That is indicating this thing's a little bit longer. What you see is a purposeful draping here that is not possible if this were a cape of that length. It's not possible. So they're trying to show us a fertility image. And of course, her knees are slightly apart. It's all done in very good taste, but it is depicting the beloved. This is not the Sophia of philosophy. This is a mother to be, or a recent mother. The blue is beautiful, the red is beautiful. She's sitting on sumptuous fabrics laced with gold, and the 7 streams of the liberal art is coming right out of her heart, and 3 on the one side and 4 on the other. So there's some interesting number play here. What I also find interesting about this image is it's broken up into 3 yet again. So you've got the 3 up here, you've got these 3 triangles. This one's upside down. You've got the 3 triangles, you've got 3 over here. But you've got the broader space up here, and she is separated. She's the queen of heaven, so she's separated from the intellectual realm of Plato and his teacher, Socrates. And this is the more mundane realm down here. Again, this is what I've taken out of this. And I think you've got your 2 pillars here, which is interesting, the writing desks of Plato and Socrates, and the green earth. I believe Malkuth is the lowest plane, the earth plane. So these are, just observing this over the years, this is what I have seen in this image. And the Queen of Heaven has become the inspiration and mother of dynasties across Europe, the mother of secret societies, earthly knowledge, inner knowledge, and ascension knowledge of the individual brave enough to go on this path. I think I have more work to do on this yet, but what I have wondered is so many people involved in Templar studies see correlations with Freemasonry. And is it possible that the ideas expressed in the medieval illumination we just saw, are some of those concepts alive in this tracing board of the 2nd degree fellowcraft? I think that over the centuries, we have lost a great deal of information on Mary Magdalene, on our true histories. I think that's quite an easy thing to have happen. People die, people become ill, people are persecuted, such as the Albigensian Crusade, purposefully stamped out. So you end up with information that is purposefully lost and accidentally lost. The number plane, the stairwell, is interesting. 3, 5, and 7 liberal arts. 3 degrees, and 5. In my view, of course, you start seeing things that resonate with you. So the first thing I thought of was Cassiopeia, but I believe that Freemasonry views these as the 5 pillars of architecture that hold up a lodge. So, and each muse in that circle was supported by a pillar with an archway over it. I won't dwell on that too heavily. I don't claim to be an expert. I'm interested, and I sporadically read into it. And of course, some of you are familiar with the concept now of Mary Magdalene as the Statue of Liberty, which I believe is the case. This is just such a beautiful piece, a remarkable piece. And I was just fascinated to find out that there are, I can't remember how many, but are there something like 13 plus smaller statues of liberty dotted around France. And one of them is viewable from the Eiffel Tower on, I believe, you know, the view going down from the Eiffel Tower. You can see one of them from there. But you have the torch of liberty, but shining a light in the darkness, revealing secrets that were hidden. Isis, in order to rescue parts of her husband, Osiris had to blacken her face with cinders. You know, the Black Madonnas, all of this weave into this figure here. And she has 7 rays on her crown. The notched keystone is interesting here, the keystone in Freemasonry. And what is termed as the M hand sign. And of course, let's see if I can do it there. There you go. You'll see this a lot in artwork of the Renaissance and up through into the 1700s of people of nobility, religious figures, all portraying their hands in this awkward position.
Told me last night and told me that Morgan was threatened yesterday at work.
We can hear somebody talking. You'll need to mute your microphone. Okay. So there's so much wrapped up in here. She is Isis. She is Liberty. She is Marianne from France, and she is Mary Magdalene, our new Eve. Well, we're pretty well getting there. I wasn't sure how far to take this. Here's an image of a stained glass window out of France. This is Chateau de la Rochefoucauld. Anyone interested in the Curse of Oak Island, you should be well familiar with this castle in France. I went there in 2018. This is out of the private chapel here, and this is Mary Magdalene, and she's holding a chalice and the cross. Unfortunately, the sun was very bright behind her that day, so I've lost her facial features here. And you have the same beautiful archway, which is quite traditional, and pillars that frame her. And I do have a book coming out in November that discusses Chateau de la Rochefoucauld, Mary Magdalene, caves that are related to the Templars in the UK, and also the Mermaid. Oh yeah, that's my last slide. Let's see, I'll go back up to the main one here, the main illustration here. We all have such deep feelings about this, or we wouldn't be here. I am privileged to be here today, and I've appreciated hearing your everyone here, your life's experiences with following Mary Magdalene on the path and your discoveries. I just want to say thank you for that. This is a lifestyle, and I know that none of us are going to be leaving this path. We're in it for the rest of our life. It'll be interesting to see what we all discover next time we're here next year. I feel like I have forgotten to say something, but I cannot recall off the top of my head what that is. So I will draw a line under this now. So
well, Gretchen, thank you very much for your talk. we've all got, we can take away a lot from that. I'm glad you mentioned the tragedy of the library in Strasbourg in 1870. The Germans were bombarding the city, which was French at the time, and destroyed the entire library, which was burned, and priceless manuscripts went up.
So upsetting.
But the good news is that the Germans felt guilty, and the German library system and academics, they clubbed together and they shipped, I don't know, 4 million books to replace what they destroyed.
Really? Oh, I didn't know
Rebuilt
that.
the library in Strasbourg. Obviously, the original stuff went up in smoke, but this is one of the many reasons I'm against war. And to me, why the work we're doing today in this conference is, we're having a peace conference, really, because we're trying to bring back the esoteric wisdom of the ancients from traces, from lost manuscripts, from books that are, and don't get me started on the Alexandria Library and what went,
Heartbreaking.
But thank you very much for a stimulating talk, Gretchen. And would you like to finish the screen sharing, and then we can? I think we'll go on to our last contribution. If you have questions for Gretchen, I'm sure you do, put them in chat, because she's obviously spent years studying this stuff. And we went down the Bacon and Oak Island route, but that would be fun. But thank you so much for your years of research and so on, and keep it up, all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to say one thing, by the way, Gretchen. I don't know if you know, Bartholdi, who designed the Statue of Liberty, was a Freemason in France, quite a high up one.
Oh, no.
He designed not only the Statue of Liberty, which is a gift to America from the French people, but he also designed a statue of Vercingetorix, the great Druid leader in Gaul, who he did defeat Caesar, although he eventually lost. So Bartholdi was interested in Druidry as well as esoteric Freemasonry and stuff. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know he was a Freemason. I suspected that he was involved in either the Rosicrucians or some other esoteric group. But thank you for that. If I had known that, I've forgotten.
No, he was. He was part of that sort of French 19th century occultism, which partly went back to the Napoleonic era and the Revolutionary era.
Okay.
Liberty, equality, fraternity was a Masonic slogan.
Yes.
I'm reading a book at the moment in French called From the Atelier to the Lodge. It's about all the famous artists who were Freemasons in France, including David, the great painter that painted Napoleon, was a Freemason. So was Napoleon. And they were all deeply into the esoteric mysteries, so there's a whole history. The Anglophone world don't really know about. I learned when I came here to France. Anyway, thank you. Anyone that ever wants to come on pilgrimage to France, I'm in the dead center of the country. Right, we have one last talk. We have one last talk, which is a film. And I think Nicola is going to share her screen. It's made by a dear friend of ours called Jolie, who lives on Sark. And you have to press screen share from your end, Nicola. It is authorized that you can do that, but you're the one that has to play the thing and then press screen share. I can't do it for you. There we are. Right, now we need the sound. This is going to be critical. Can you put the sound on, Nicola, somehow? Yeah, put it to on. Good. Should work now. Okay, we've had a message in chat, Nicola, if you check it out. Apparently you have to exit. You need to go off screen share. Okay. And then it tells you to optimize sound. Elizabeth Ashley, can you tell us where, when you say you need to go off screen share, do you mean Nicola has to do that or me?
Yeah, the presenter needs to close a screen share.
Right.
And then she should be able to see, when it's saying, do you want to screen share? To the left-hand side of the screen, it will say optimize sound. The other thing she could try doing is turning up the volume really loudly, her end, so we might be able to hear her feed.
Right. So, Nicola, I hope you heard that. Try again.
Through Christianity, my first introduction to the divine, and then I turned my back on it. And when I sort of realised that I felt like I had a CCTV God that was judging me, and for a while was atheist, and then came back to spirituality when I realised that I missed having something to say thank you to, and something bigger than me that kind of lifted me up. And then realised, well, I have every right to just worship the earth. And when I'd looked into it when I was an atheist, I was like, oh, maybe I'm a pagan. And I looked into it and sort of discovered that it was all very relatively recently made up. And that didn't work for me in the place I was in, sort of in this kind of logical, scientific space, headspace. It was like, well, you know, I can see that this is all made up, like by so-and-so Gardner. And, you know, Crowley and people had all kind of made up these theories and ideas, and I was just like, actually, yeah, it's not my bag. And then came back to it and was like, well, I do worship the earth. That is what I worship, and it doesn't matter that everything got made up at some point. And this is my, you know, this is the thing I worship. I worship this. I worship this stunning, beautiful forest. It's a rainforest. And everyone says that as soon as you step into here, you relax. And it's because the trees are in communication with each other here. And so the chemicals are being released because there's a mycelium network. And I mean, this just is my cathedral. It's so sacred, it's so beautiful, and it has an immediate effect on me being in here. I called her Magdalena because having refound my faith and then having extremely powerful experiences on ayahuasca and generally through fooling theatre, which I'll introduce you to momentarily, and circle plays, which we do in fooling, and then also through doing geomancy and working with the land, connecting to earth energies. I mean, I'm forever opening up and things are being revealed to me. And one of the things that I discovered when I read Mary Magdalene Revealed was that the first few pages of her gospel are missing. And it's the first, I think it was the first 7 pages of her gospel are missing. And that's ironic because she has 7 stages to development. So 7 stages to to revelation and like this inner journey. And the Fool, there are 7 stages to the Fool, and I'm ruled by Saturn. I'm Capricorn, and Saturn returns to the birth chart every 28 years. And those who are ruled by Saturn especially notice the 7-year chapters, so each quarter of that cycle. And my life literally breaks down into 7-year chapters. And I actually have been writing a book every 7 years since I was 28, capturing those cycles, those different chapters. So this was Mary Magdalene, my cathedral, Magdalena, and I use this walk as a spiritual journey. I go down to the sea and I bathe in the sea, and it feels like bathing in natural water is also kind of part of worshipping her, being in she, which is Mother Earth, connecting to this beautiful, beautiful planet, Gaia, and knowing that the goddess is in me. And that was an experience I had on the ayahuasca, where my body atomized and I turned into a queen bee, and I was just pulsating and orgasming for hours, which was rather enjoyable, and reproducing, and I could just feel the goddess in me. I was the goddess, and that has never left me. And now I see how we are all facets of this inner divine jewel, and that divine jewel has the masculine and feminine, and that betwixt the two. So yeah, that's never left me, and it was as a profound experience as it was when I had a born again experience as a Christian when I was 11, and experienced what it would feel like to be nailed up to a cross. I saw myself being pulled up in the air on this cross, and looking down at all these people that I loved and was doing this for, and them looking back at me with hatred, and just that feeling of like what that experience would be like. And then I felt like a tap of water started pouring through my head, and just my body was full of mud, and this water just poured through my body. And it was a very profound experience that got me through school. And when I felt bullied, I got pretty badly bullied at school, and like other experiences that weren't pleasant, I just knew that I was okay, like that I had this fortification, this support, this love, this ally within me. That the thing that I then turned my back on was, it felt like the translation of that in Christianity was that thing was exterior to me and I was beholden to it. Whereas what I've gleaned from my knowledge of Mary Magdalene and my experience of the divine feminine and the divine, it's feminine and masculine, the divine, is that it's within. And there's a beautiful line in Mary Magdalene is Revealed, which I don't know if it comes from the author or whether it's from the gospel, but it says, every time you reach a hand out, a hand reaches out to pull you back in. And I love that. We have everything within us. And it's just a journey. The totem animal of my life is the snail. To enjoy the ride. I've always got a bag on my back. I'm always off somewhere. And just enjoy the journey, enjoy the ride. Because there is no finish line. Well, there is. There's death. So you don't want to get there too quick. Enjoy the journey. The ultimate race is life. There are 7 stages to the Fool, and that begins with us being in the audience, where we're just normal, everyday people. Then we move to the stage, and that leap from getting from the audience onto the stage is the most terrifying leap. It's like, because if you're going from the audience to the stage, you're going with nothing prepared. So the most foolish thing that anyone could ever do is leap into the unknown and jump onto that stage. And then once you're on the stage, you turn around and you face the audience and you begin to speak. Then 3 is, as you're speaking, a play begins to form and you step back into the play. And then 5 is when you feel a touch paper. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 is when you sort of feel a touch paper where you feel sort of bounced into the archetypal realm. It's when you feel like you've touched on something archetypal. Then 5 is when you come back into the play from the archetypal realm. 6 is when you come back into talking to the audience, having been on this whole journey. And 7 is when you get back into the audience. But you've been on this whole spiritual journey. And so people years later will see you having watched you in a play or in a performance and be like, oh, I saw you do that thing. You'll never go back to being a 1 for those people who saw you. You will always be a 7. So there's something interesting about that and the correlation between Mary Magdalene and the fact that the first 6 pages of the gospel were missing. So her gospel starts on page 7. And she looks at and talks about the 7 trials or the 7 summits, the 7 things we have to overcome in our life. And she's described in the Bible as having had the 7 demons expelled from her, which are relatable to the 7 deadly sins, and that was used against her as a way of saying, well, then she was a really sinful person. But the other way of looking at it is she was an enlightened being and she had overcome the 7 summits that all of us should or would overcome if we were to find ourselves enlightened. So it actually describes an enlightened being rather than someone who was evil. It's someone who has done the work. And this has led me on to a way of working that I would like to explore with you. I'm also going to do some fooling and I'm going to channel a bit of Mary Magdalene. The thing that's great about the Fool is there's no sacred, like, oh no, you can't possibly do that. I mean, yes, you can. So I'll channel her. I've got nothing planned. I don't know what will come out. We'll just see what happens. What I would like to suggest for us to do as an exploration, something for you to do at home, is to draw a rose with hearts with 7 petals, and taking some time to meditate, to sit and consider what are like your 7 blocks. What are 7 things that are, and these can change over time. This is an exercise you could keep going back to. It doesn't have to be defining, but it might be that, you know, reflecting on the 7 deadly sins of sloth and envy and greed, like where do they show up in your life, and to kind of name them and to write those down on these 7 petals. So these are your 7 obstacles. I'll write this on here. 7 obstacles. So one of mine is hedonism. Ambition. Oversharing or overcompensating. Over the top. I'm going to put over the top because it shows up in lots of ways. Over the top. I'm easily so not present, not being present. Comparison. Like food greedy. I really like food. And impatient. Okay, so impatient and what's gluttonous. Okay, so those are 7 things that come up for me lots of times. They're kind of things that jump out for me. And then working with the power of Mary Magdalene, the reason why I've asked you to bring a rose, preferably a red rose. I mean, this is pretty red, but it'd be really nice if it was one of those gorgeous, really deep reds. We're going to work with this rose for supporting us in developing. So what I will do is I'll pluck 7 petals from the rose and I'll write on them sort of words of inspiration or support that will come from Mary Magdalene, and we'll let those dry, and then with the next full moon burn them and send them up to the heavens to support you with overcoming these obstacles. So this is the magic that we're going to cast. But in order to do that, I'm going to first of all channel some of Mary Magdalene. I'm going to do it first of all by, so today, working with the power and magic of Mary Magdalene, do a reading and see what she has to say to us. Now, in the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, there are 4 pages missing in the middle. And the question that she's asking Christ at the moment of these pages being ripped out is, when a person has a divine vision, do they see with their soul or with their spirit? And Jesus says he does not see with his soul or his spirit, he sees with his mind. But the word that's used for mind in ancient Greek and ancient Egyptian doesn't translate to English very well, but it kind of means like your deepest perception. In Fooling, we call it our silent twin. So we say we have our inner world and our outer world, and that sphincter in the middle is our ego. And when we're fooling, we try to unravel that and flip our inner world into our outer world. And I believe that the reason why the world is fucked is because we separated the inner world and said that that was nothing, that the dream and spirituality and creativity and imagination are irrelevant, and all we cared about was the outer. And that is an immoral and awful hellhole, which is what we've created. Like, you know, we've taken the spirit and soul out of this outer world, and by doing that we've disregarded caring about it, and have done things in a very immoral way. So part of what I think the healing that's needed in us and in the world is to bring that inner world back, and for everything we do to be an act of worship and everything we do to be sacred. And that's the work that I do. That's what I'm about, is trying to flip that circle into our lives all the time, so that everything we do is sacred and magic and inner work and outer work at the same time. And that's what Fooling is so good at, and that's why the Fool is the 0 at the top of the tarot deck, because it's the known and the unknown. The Magus is the known, and the unknown is the Fool, and the Fool is happy and in love with everything, including the inner world. And it's because that work's been done on the 7 demons, and there's the 7 stages of the Fool to support you with playing in that space, and we've managed to like ease the ego sphincter enough to open it up. So, going to work with Mary Magdalene energy to pull these runes and just see what she has to say to us at this point in time in history, in the world, and with everything that's going on. So we have the spear, Teraz, which is about being direct. So this is about being absolutely direct. Physically, in the physical world, she is shining a torch into the darkness and is illuminating spaces that are not seen to us at the moment. This is physically in the outer world. In our communication, this is what I was just saying, it's both above and below. It's the inner and outer. It's the yew tree. It's the tree of life, Yggdrasil. So this is saying, in terms of our communication, we need to start talking about both spaces, the inner and the outer. Emotionally, or in terms of our passion, this is Ing, which is the sperm. It's the seed of inspiration. It's masculine, fertile energy. So this means that we need to have the drive to penetrate through the bubble that is the nonsense that the world that we live in now. So how do we penetrate through that and make something new, transform, make something that wasn't there before? And then spiritually, this is going to bring us joy, and to have joy in it, because there's a real carrot and rod, thing when it comes to climate crisis and everything that's happening in the world. And it's all very rod heavy. But actually, the more you fall in love with life, the more you fall in love with your inner world, the more you allow your inner world to spill out, and the more you allow spirituality and outer worlds to become one, the more joyful you are. I mean, the Fool is full of joy. It's a joyful, joyous thing to do. And so to merge these worlds and bring all that juicy, yummy magic into the world is just a joyous, wonderful thing. I always pull 3 tarot cards as well. This gives us a little more insight. So, Mary Magdalene speaking to us about the world and her advice or guidance. So we have the devil. So this is the past, and this is the master of the material realm. So this is what has been happening. We have this very cock-heavy, I mean, it looks like a penis, very cock-heavy patriarchy that has mastered the physical world. Well done, mastered the physical world. Then we have the high priestess, because she is rising, and the goddess is rising again, the divine feminine. And we need this. We need the divine feminine to give women the strength to help steer the wheel away from this iceberg that we're heading towards. It needs to be all hands on deck, but it means that those who are currently steering the wheel need to relinquish some power and let everyone join in with helping to move in a completely different direction. And it means we need to let in the cyclical, because what we're doing is linear, and that is destroying us because we're not considering where things come from or where they go. So we need to be cyclical, but if you find a balance between the two, then you get a spiral. And if we do this and we work together, then it's going to just bring us pleasure. And this is like the joy. There is no reason for our lives to not be beautiful and wonderful, celebratory, creative, pleasurable acts of magic. I'm going to do 2 more cards. This is like a little nudge in a direction. So this is using our wisdom. Using the wisdom, we know so much, and it's time for all of it to join forces. There's a saying which I find very important in my life. Well, first of all, the question mark is my crucifix, but secondly, that science without spirituality is immoral, and spirituality without science is wah-wah. So we need a bit of both, right? You need to be practical. You need to know, you need to trust science. You can't just be spiritual and be like, I don't believe anything that a scientist says. But also science needs to have a moral compass. Otherwise, we're inventing atom bombs and destroying the planet. So we need to work together, and they do actually join. I've always felt that it's like science, science explains how a car works, and religion explains who made the car and why. So I don't think that they're separate things. I've never understood why it's kind of one or the other. And I feel that Mary Magdalene was someone who was very wise and knowledgeable, and she anointed Jesus. Like, she knew how to do things. She was full of ancient wisdom from the pagan, heathen faith, and then was totally up with the new ideas and was there at the cutting edge of this new way of thinking that was coming from the teachings of Christ. And I think that's how we all have to be. We need to be steeped in indigenous and sacred knowledge, and also be right at the forefront of what's happening and what's new, and to be open to it, because otherwise you're becoming a conservative yourself. We need to stay open and liberal with our imagination. Transform. Now, that is a Mary Magdalene card, is it not? So it's time to transform. It's time for the phoenix to rise from the ashes. We need to change the way that we live our lives, and we need to transform our reality. And that's no small thing, but also is completely doable, and doesn't have to be Armageddon. It can be an act of pleasure. So I'm going to explore Mary Magdalene. So I don't know as much about her as I'm sure many of you do, and my connection to her has been a beautiful journey, and I can feel the sense of something tantalizing, but I just have to trust that the journey that I'm on is only just begun. And so from that place, my gospel is just a simple one. Know that inside you is all the answers. You are born from the infinite. You go back to the infinite. And every second you walk this earth, you are still infinite. You're having a mortal experience. There are challenges that are set, and we all have them. That's what this life is for. 7 summits are placed before us. And in this life, perhaps you will manage to ascend all 7 and find heaven, which is in here. It doesn't have to be this lifetime. There are many lifetimes. But one day you will find this place and you will feel the connection and the joy and the pleasure of the infinite from which you have come, which is God, which is here, which is here. Every time you reach a hand out and beg for help, there will always be a hand reaching out to you and pulling you back in. We are all one. So work on your journey. Do not rush it. This is an absolute treat for you to be here. No matter how difficult, no matter how hard the struggles, trust that they are nothing more than what you can cope with. The universe is only ever sending you what you are capable of dealing with. Trust it. Trust yourself. Keep falling back into the hands of the universe and let it lead. The more you fight the flow, the more difficult it will be. You have chosen to be here. And life is so short. So enjoy and relish every second. Follow that red cord and it will lead you back to yourself, which is the infinite and the sacred heart. Travel well. Good pilgrim. So working with these 7 obstacles, we'll now think about 7 blessings that I wish to give to myself. Reflecting on what we have channeled from Mary Magdalene today. Pleasure. discipline, trust, joy, patience, kindness, and most importantly, love. So I've placed these 7 blessings over my 7 obstacles in my flower, and I will leave these on my altar if you have a special place where you can put them, and you know, any crystals or anything that you can place with them to help raise the vibrations and strengthen it. I'll place the rest of my rose with it, and when it comes to the full moon, I'm going to take these petals and I'm going to burn them and send them up to the universe and ask for their support with helping me on my journey. But yeah, think of the snail enjoying the ride. Everywhere it goes is home. It's happy wherever it be. So trust the journey. Don't rush. Let it unravel and relish every second of it. But absolutely pour this outer world full of your inner world. Fill it with imagination. Channel your archetypes and just allow the magic to flow. Thank you. Sorry I couldn't be there with you on this beautiful day, but I'm celebrating someone's love at a wedding. But hopefully I shall see you next year. Blessings.
Right. Well, that was Jolie, who is a wonderful theatre professional and, you know, a magician, a fool, and she runs a wonderful full moon ceremony. So, and lives on the island of Sark. Thank you very much, Jolie, for your contribution to finish our experience. I hope you could all hear that. The sound was quite low for me, but I'm hoping when it's filmed and recorded, it'll be better. Annalisa, would you like to sum up what we've been doing today? It's been a wonderful day. It's gone 11 p.m. here in France, and we can just have a few closing words, I think, and then head off to do our own practice.
Hi, Dr. Thomas. Well, you know, you're really, really good at doing that. But I'll just say that I think just to kind of reiterate what I said when I opened this morning, that, you know, it's not a mistake that the birth of the modern feminist movement and the discovery of the Gnostic Gospels, especially the Gospel of Mary, happened within the same, you know, 100-year period. There's something rising in the culture. Many of us have spoken to that today. We've, what's been weaving through our conversation are these powerful stories of embodiment, of experiences of love, experiences of who Mary Magdalene is to each of us, showing up to us in a way or in a form that I think most resonates with our lived experience and what we're looking to heal within ourselves, heal within the collective, bring forward for the healing of the world. And so I would say that's how I would leave it today. So thank you, everybody else, or everybody. And Dr. Thomas, I pass the mic back over to you.
Well, thank you. So look, if you want to keep in touch with the Mary Magdalene Studies Association, I've put my email in the chat. You can contact Annalisa or Lena Tevenaz was going to be joining us and giving the farewell talk, but she's on an all-day academic thing at Pacifica Graduate Institute. So Lena couldn't be with us. It's terrible the way they make these scholars, young scholars, work so hard, isn't it? But I think she should get 22nd of July off, personally, but there we are. Anyway, Lena, we love you. Thank you for your help. And like I said earlier, if you want to submit your talk in a journal form, you can write it up as an essay, you know, send it to Annalisa or myself, or indeed Lena, who are the joint editors with me. And I think it's been a really stunning day. All I would say is, what was really interesting is watching the synchronicities between different people's talks. I mean, Gretchen was talking about the number 7, the seven liberal muses. Even Jolie in the last was talking about the number 7, the 7 stages of the Fool. You know, there were many synchronicities between the different talks, and I'm keeping a diary of synchronicities in my life, and I haven't had time to actually publish it or even complete it because they're happening all the time. I just jot them down in my book. And today was an example of, you know, synchronicities in action. To me, what that means is that we are all interconnected. And you probably know the Sioux prayer, Mitakuye. It means we're all relatives, we're all interconnected. So I'm just going to finish, you know, thanking everyone again for coming. And let's just say a farewell prayer in your own words to yourself, or you can put your microphone on. I will just close by saying Mitakuye. We're all related. A message from Michael Hearns. Michael, are you there still? Apparently he has something to add.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Michael, do say something, final points.
Well, I just wanted to say that I've enjoyed the day. Now, I missed some of the presentations because I had to go out, but I hope to look at them on the recording,
right?
You know, and view them over different nights. Now, I also want to say that Dr. Joanna, I sent her and Anna Lumley, I sent them a copy of my book, Mary Magdalene, the First Pope, about 6 years ago. Now, I was writing in the message, I would like to make it free and send it to everybody in this group. And it contains a lot of new evidence that shows that Mary Magdalene was the chosen successor of Jesus. So I don't know how to upload it to, or where to upload it to, but maybe you could let me know, Thomas. But if not, I have given my email address in, and if people write to me, I'll reply with a copy of the book.
That sounds wonderful, Michael. Thank you very much for that. And I will definitely email you, hearns.michael@gmail.com.
Yes.
And it sounds to me like you're speaking to us from Ireland. Yeah.
Does the accent sound like that?
It does. It's a bit of a giveaway. But, you know, thank you for being with us today. And maybe you can talk next year. I mean, if you know people who've written books about Mary Magdalene who are on her trail, have had encounters, etc., then, you know, we're an open forum. We're growing. And I want to say also that Libby Schrader would have spoken this year. She's doing a Ph.D. in America on Mary Magdalene, her being eroded from the textual record, you know, literally. But she just got married and she's on honeymoon in Hungary. And that's why she apologized. She can't speak. So I think if you get married and you're having a honeymoon, that's fine, you know. After all, isn't that the point of the whole thing?
Yes.
But anyway, so let's celebrate together. Thank you for just sharing your Mary Magdalene Day with us. It's been wonderful. and see you again next year. And if you want to come to France and explore the landscape here, you're very welcome. But
Thank you,
blessed,
Thomas. Thank you.
shalom, shalom, as they say, shalom. Yeah,
Shalom.
thank you. Now,
Thank you, everyone.
yeah, and thanks to Nicola for helping with the recording, and we will be uploading it to YouTube at some point, possibly in 2 or 3 chunks. We'll let you know, when it's available.